All right, welcome to technical session number 26. We'll be talking about introduction to mobile devices. This morning we got into laptops, and we kind of let you guys know that with regards to the A+, there is a firm distinction between a laptop and a mobile device. So you would actually have three overall categories where you have desktops, laptops, mobile devices. Mobile devices are going to be more encompassing your cell phones and tablets and stuff like that, and phablets. They do get into that. But it is more in line with those particular types of devices rather than the actual laptops themselves. So we're going to be able to identify mobile devices and explain what exactly qualifies them as a mobile device. There's very specific things that need to be in play for us to consider it a mobile device. We're going to be able to describe the characteristics of common mobile devices, including tablets, phones, e-readers, things like that. Compare and contrast the software platforms that are utilized on these devices, capabilities, accessories, mobile ports of different mobile devices as well. And lastly, we're going to be able to describe the role of mobile devices in today's society. So, get into that. Now, the BSMs we want to keep in mind are adaptability. This is a big thing with regard to mobile devices, as there are new ones coming out yearly, if not every few months, you know, be it smartwatches, mobile phones, tablets, what have you. There seems to be something new coming out every few months or so. And also future orientation, understanding that we have goals in mind. We are all here with a very, very specific goal in mind over the next 3 months. And we need to always keep present in our mind that the actions we take today are going to affect our outcome with regards to reaching that goal in the next few months. All right, first, what exactly is a mobile device? It is essentially something that is small and portable that also has and is considered an electronic device that enables computing. Over time, as they have improved in capabilities, their need for technical support has also drastically increased. Some devices take off and become extremely popular, some kind of fail. And, you know, there's various reasons for that. Some of you may remember Google Glass. That was going to be like the new wave of being able to walk through and interact with the world because you'd be quite literally constantly connected to the net, being fed information through a little monocle and being able to record and all that fun stuff. But this device ended up being very, very controversial. So it never fully took off. But there are other companies that are trying to do some version of this in order to more streamline our interactions with mobile devices. So overall, they tend to use one of three main platforms, typically. And that is iOS, which is your Apple, your Android. And, you know, for the 5 people out there still using it, Windows Mobile. That's another one that is out there, technically speaking. Some examples of mobile devices, if you go back in the past, you have PDAs, you have tablets. Laptops are not considered mobile devices for this, but sometimes they throw them in there. I don't know why, but they do distinguish them separate from this. Here is some list that we'll be talking about throughout this, which would be tablets, smartphones, wearable technology devices like smartwatches, phablets, which is that fun middle ground between a phone and a tablet, e-readers, smart cameras, and GPS devices. Let's see here. So tablets. Early versions of this weren't anything like they are today at all. Who wants to take a guess as when the first tablet actually was available? What year?
2001.
2001?
The 90s.
90s? Would it shock you? Would it shock you?
Oh,
no. Wasn't it 89?
It's actually earlier than that.
Oh.
I think it was in the 70s.
Oh. Yeah, with the what is it? The grid, the something grid.
I think so. I think they talk about it here in a little bit, but I believe it was in like the late 70s was actually the first edition of what we would consider to be a tablet.
A strong word.
I'm curious what the operating system was. I didn't do that earlier.
Yeah, I don't remember what operating system it had very, very limited functionality, but you know,
I think it was DDoS.
It might have been that, yeah. But today's tablets typically run off of the three main operating system: Android, iOS, or Windows. The size can vary between a couple. I think it's like 8 or 9 inches, all the way up to like 12 plus now. Like some of the very large tablets have pretty massive screens. They typically have built-in cameras. Compared to a laptop, they tend to be less expensive. Many of them have handwriting recognition software already built in, GPS built in. Obviously, they would use solid-state hard drives because these are going to be moved around and jostled quite a lot. 3 and 4G mobile support, now coming out with 5G. Built-in touchscreens, and some examples of this would be like the Microsoft Surface, the Kindle Fire, the iPad, things like that. So here it is. Oh, it's 1972. Was the first one. I was a little off on that. So yeah, 1972 was our first evolution of the tablet itself.
I wasn't thinking about keyboard. Okay, that makes sense now. I was like, touchscreen? You sure with that? Well, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, there's different types of touchscreens. You're thinking of the most modern iteration of touchscreens versus the resistive, which was a much older technology.
PDAs.
Yeah, I was thinking of the 89 grid pad.
Mm-hmm. So right here, and then we get all the way up to the iPad Air in 2014, and then we have like the Pros and all that stuff coming out now. So just to kind of give you an idea, obviously you don't need to memorize this, it's more just kind of giving you an idea as to the evolution of tablets over time. Another group in this would be the smartphones. They typically run either iOS, Android, or, very rare occasions, Windows. They have an on-screen keyboard, typically touchscreen, although there still are some with the standard keyboard still on them. Most have motion sensors on them. And then some use more than one SIM card, actually. So you can like have dual SIM cards in your phone. So say if you have to carry a work phone and then you have your personal phone and you do not want those to be the same thing, you could put both SIM cards into a singular device and it operate as both of those devices. And you don't have to carry two phones with you, but can still operate off of the dual SIMs. And some have, Android, have the SD card slot to expand storage capacity. This has never been something that Apple allowed, but it was a big thing for Android phones. I don't remember if Windows Phone had that capability. Smartphone evolution. We start here with the Gordon Gecko Special, although his was cream colored, I believe. Right here, the Motorola. And then go all the way up to the Sonys from the 2010s, 2014s. You can kind of see how these evolved. I recall having at least a couple of these phones throughout the years. My stepfather actually has one older than even this one here. He has the satchel phone. Now, quite literally, it was like a over-the-shoulder satchel bag that had a big battery pack in it, and almost like it was like a house phone shoved into a bag. And then when you got in the car, you could plug it in the car, and it was one of the earliest editions of a mobile phone. Something you do what?
Where did people keep like the Motorola, like the first one? Like I never understood like where people kept that. Like
utility belt,
briefcase.
Oh, I guess a briefcase. That's true. Yeah.
You saw some in movies that open a briefcase to make a phone call. I'm like, oh, okay.
Some of them had that. That was they had satchel bags or phones like that too, where they actually had the battery pack in the briefcase. Yeah. But
I guess it's a good weapon if someone attacks you.
But it was always a joke for years because each year the phones got smaller, and so they were like joking. I think if there was a sci-fi series called Eureka, and the phones they had were like this big. I mean, they were tiny, and they'd sit there and talk to them because they're saying each year the phones got smaller. But then for some reason the currents shifted when we moved to smartphone technology, where the phones kept getting bigger and bigger. To the point where we had the phablets where a person has like a big screen TV holding it up to the side of their head, and like the phone's like bigger than their face, and that became a thing. So it was just kind of interesting how that evolution took place over time, going trying to get smaller and smaller and smaller, then finally bigger and bigger and bigger.
My dad has an Android right now that's like huge, and my uncle always makes fun of him by like when he leaves it on the table, he's like, "Who left their VHS tape here?"
Yeah, they get pretty darn big.
I mean, you don't want to be looking at like you want to watch videos on a bigger screen, I guess, or something. I don't know.
I get it, but then it comes down to portability. Like, do I have to wear cargo pants with giant pockets to be able to carry my phone around?
Yeah, his is excessive. I like the iPhone 11. That's a good size for me.
Yeah, I can see that. So, but they still make the little 3.25-inch ones too. So, I mean, if you want a smaller phone, you can get it. I know Android has several options around that era too. Other types of devices we can talk about is wearable technology. Now, OLEDs, as we had talked about during display device, is really changing this arena. The ability to wrap screens and fold screens and utilize that is really starting to change it. We're just starting to get first gen editions of this in the phone markets now, like just starting to see that technology be implemented. With regards to the A+ for 1001 edition, the most recent they got to were the smartwatches. We had GPS features, anti-lost alert, which is great if you have, say, elderly parents. If you know what a silver alert is, it's like if somebody with Alzheimer's, wanders out of an elderly home and gets lost, they'll put out a silver alert. It's like the opposite of an amber alert. These watches, if the elderly are wearing them, they can send an alert to it. It'll ping the GPS and tell people exactly where that person is so that they can be collected faster rather than taking hours or days, reducing the possibility of injury to the people. Also, they thought to add in time, which was great because the watch industry had seen such a huge blow with the creation of cell phones. Almost nobody was wearing watches anymore. It became more of a status symbol than a functional accessory. So that was an industry that almost got completely destroyed by the cell phone industry and never saw it coming. Well, the smartwatch brought it back. So we now could keep time devices on our wrists. You could get vibration alerts if you receive text messages. It allowed you a real quick way to check your messages and make sure you got everything you needed. Some of them had micro USB input ports as well. It would allow you to actually control your phone, get increased functionality. You could play music through it. You could use it for health reasons, tracking heartbeats. They actually have some that are a little bit bulkier that'll track blood pressure, all that kind of fun stuff. So they had a lot of functionality. So I didn't even forgot about body temperature as well. So if you're somebody who's very active It allows you to, track your progress and things like that. Also, the heart monitors and stuff like this have been very useful to doctors because it's kind of like a portable EKG. It's not as sensitive as that, but it's allowed doctors to detect heart issues much sooner with people who use these devices and allow their doctors access to the logs. So there has been, a lot of early, like catching problems earlier, so you have a better chance of solving them rather than letting them exacerbate even further. Some have additional chest straps that will talk with the watch itself to relay the heart rates, and the chest straps are more accurate than the actual wrist version. Most popular ones would be Fitbit, by far is the most popular. Adidas, Nike, Polar, Microsoft, and then you have the iWatch is in there as well. Or Apple Watch. Other wearable technology, glasses and headsets. This is kind of what we're talking about here with the Google Glass. Was one of the main providers at first, and people who have looked at it from the outside saying the main contributor as to why this failed was the creep factor, is what they called it. It was the camera. A lot of people didn't like to be filmed without their knowledge and stuff like that. So it really got a lot of people upset, and it got to the point where people were uncomfortable even wearing it because of the looks and the interactions they would have. So they're trying to alter it and find a way to where they don't have to rely on the camera mechanism in order to feed you the information you need. And it played into what is called augmented reality, or AR, where you would overlay digital information on the physical world. So like if you were looking down the street in Brooklyn, it would give you the names of like all the restaurants and shops and bodegas and stuff along the entire street. So you'd know where things were at a quick glance without having to ask for directions or look things up on your phone. You could quite literally see. And if you wanted to use GPS to look up directions, you could quite literally see the pin in your field of view and just walk towards that pin. So kind of neat stuff with augmented reality. It's different than virtual reality. Virtual reality kind of cuts you off completely and overlays a whole new reality on top of everything. So you're kind of inside another world, where augmented reality lays the world on top of it. Yeah, Free Guy is a good example of that. When he found the glasses that showed him where everything was and what everything was going on. So that would be like augmented reality. It gives you extra information overlaid on top of the real world. HoloLens is a really good example of that. If they could work out some of the bugs productivity-wise, HoloLens could be amazing. But they need to increase, view angle, battery life, and weight of the headset. And then people would be more inclined to wear it for longer periods of time, but it has the most business potential rather than personal social potential. All right. So other types of mobile devices, we have the phablet, which we kind of talked about, which is the blending between a phone and a tablet. They typically say it is smaller than a tablet, so it has a display size of around 5 to 7 inches. That is what is called the phablet range. Larger than that, they consider it a tablet. Smaller than that, they would consider it a smartphone. E-readers. Kindle was one of the first ones to the market, and Nook wasn't too far behind. I don't even know if Nook is still around at this point. I know they were struggling pretty bad, but Kindle is still fairly popular. And Samsung. It worked out. Go ahead.
I said with Samsung too.
With the Samsung reader?
Yeah, no, Samsung tablet.
Okay. That would be more in the tablet category, so specifically the e-reader is what I'm looking at here. The nice thing about the e-readers is the technology that they use for putting the images on the screen required very little battery power at all. Most of the battery power was utilized when it was changing the page. And then very little was needed to keep things in line. That's where that paper white technology is. There's no backlight whatsoever. It's just aligning the pixels in the page. And then once they do that, it uses almost no energy. And then when you change the page, that's when the power is used to recycle everything. So these could go days without being charged. And the nice thing was they had a pretty good amount of storage on them. You could carry dozens of books in your pocket. And if you wished, they did have the ability to browse the internet even with limited capacity. In fact, there were several people who, or there was a few cases where somebody had been kidnapped and they had a Kindle. Like their kidnappers allowed them to keep the Kindle, and they were able to send messages and ask for help through the Kindle because the kidnapper did not realize that they had internet capability. So there's a few cases like that, kind of interesting. Questions, comments, complaints so far? Again, just a quick overview. It's our first time looking at this stuff. There are some labs where you'll deal with some mobile devices and do some basic interacting with it, setting things up, Wi-Fi, all that fun stuff.
Can I mention some quick takeaways from what you've discussed so far?
Absolutely.
Okay. So you mentioned the solid state drives for the tablets, which is important so that they can be shaken and stirred and still function. You guys to know about the wearables, the Fitbit and other things like that, that's important. And the size of a phablet between 5 and 7 inches is important. And the low energy consumption of the e-reader.
That is a wonderful summary.
What do we need to know about a Fitbit in particular though?
You need to know about wearables. What are wearables?
Yeah, like Fitbit tracks health, different health, bits of health information, stuff like that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, just a couple others we need to kind of be aware of. Smart cameras. This is very specific because not all cameras are smart cameras. These cameras can extract information from the images they take and then make decisions based upon what is extracted. They utilize robot guidance. Some can use biometric recognition, like facial recognition. And they code reading verification, and they have features that can make it like it's a mobile device. They typically have touchscreens on them as well. And they embed other information into the photos you take. Depending on the settings you utilize on the phone, they use what's called metadata or MIDI data, where they can put the time and date of when the photo was taken, the geographic location where the photo was taken, and all that fun stuff. So all that will be embedded into the image itself. So even if another computer is reading that image, they can read that metadata or the metadata and then see all of that stuff, like when it was taken, where you were, who you're with, all that fun stuff. All right, GPS, or Global Positioning System. It is a satellite-based navigation system utilized in the US, and it provides location and time services. It is rare that you will see a GPS standalone device. They do exist. They used to be only standalone. Hikers use them a lot, military, obviously. And then when we started using Garmin's and other GPS devices like in our cars, the early editions of those were standalone, but now they tend to be incorporated in a lot of the devices we have. In order for a GPS to calculate where you're located, it needs communication with 3 different satellites at a given time. So the satellites themselves don't make any of the calculations. They quite literally just send pings. And your phone takes those pings and then does the math inside the phone, and then it calculates exactly where you are based off of that. But you need line of sight, so you need to have clear view of the sky, line of sight for 3 satellites in order to get longitude and latitude. If you have a 4th, you can get altitude as well. You're probably thinking line of sight, that might be a little difficult in a big city like New York, right? Having enough visibility of the sky to see 3 different satellites.
So if
well,
you're in the middle of nowhere, it wouldn't work?
Huh?
If you're in the middle of nowhere, it wouldn't work?
Oh, it absolutely would work in the middle of nowhere. You can see the sky, it works, right?
But wouldn't the satellites be like too far or no?
No further than they would be in the city. They have satellites that are constantly going around the Earth. I think there's a total of 77 up there, and like, what is it, like 20 something are in use at any given time. Let's see here. So there's a total of 77 satellites, 31 are transmitting at any given time. And they're all around the globe. And then all you need is visibility of 3 of them to get your calculation. So even if you're in the middle of the woods or you're in the middle of the desert, your GPS will still work because it's working off of your signal from the satellites. You may not have mobile signal, like you wouldn't be able to make a phone call because you're not close enough to a cell tower, but you can calculate your position in a GPS. In a city, though, you typically don't have enough skyline sight to get 3 satellites. So what happens in the city is they do some funny magic between being able to see, I think it's like 2 satellites, and then you can use a cell tower. And the cell tower kind of assists in that calculation because it helps narrow the field. And so between the cell tower and the GPS satellites, it gives you a close approximation of where you are. It's like GPS, or it's like cell tower assisted GPS is, I believe, what they call it. Questions so far? So key takeaways from the GPS. The satellites do no calculations. They send the pings. The receiver in your phone makes the calculations and determines where you are. And you need 3 in order to be able to determine your location. Otherwise, you have to use a cell tower to assist. All right. Some other common characteristics. Go ahead.
I just want you to repeat that last line. You said the cell phone is, the satellites themselves are not sending anything.
The satellites themselves are not calculating anything. All they're doing is sending out pings. They're sending out small bits of information. And your cell phone or whatever GPS device you have, based on the information it's receiving, makes the calculation as to where you're located.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, you know, it's relatively simple technology.
Keep alive, almost.
All right. So other common characteristics among mobile devices, they'll use a variety of types of screens. Most often they will use the less expensive TN or twisted pneumatic screens. And the more expensive ones will use the IPS, so the IPS is becoming more common with OLEDs and stuff like that. And it gives you those richer colors and wider viewing angles. Latest smartphones, you know, use the OLED. I think Apple just started using that. Android has been on that train for quite some time now. Most devices are touchscreen, although they do still keep out like, they still do have a lot of them with the actual push buttons because it actually aids with the visually impaired. Touchscreens are a real big sticking point in that arena. And then we have 2 types of touchscreens that we need to be aware of. and you do need to know the difference between these two, and that is resistive touchscreens versus capacitive touchscreens. So the two different types of touchscreens that you will come across. Older devices use the resistive touch. And this specifically registers based off of pressure. So when you use your credit card in the store and they have you sign the pad, those typically, up until very recently, were resistive touch. So it was just registering your pressure on the device, and that is how it registers your signal. Or UPS, when they had you sign for a package, all of those were resistive touch devices. More modern uses capacitive touch, significantly more sensitive to the touch. They don't require any type of ongoing calibration. Resistive touch needs to be calibrated very regularly. Capacitive doesn't require you to calibrate it. It does this automatically every time you start up. Questions so far? All right. So some other common characteristics of mobile devices. Many of them have cameras, although they keep adding cameras. You know, there was this point and shoot camera. I was joking that this is what cell phones were going to look like. Let me see if I can find a picture of it real quick. And it was just like a wall of lenses on the back of it. Find it. But I'll look for it here in a little bit. But what it was it had basically any kind of lens you could imagine on a point and shoot. It had a fisheye lens, a black and white lens. You know, it could use all of them together to make like a three-dimensional image, all this kind of fun stuff. And we're starting to incorporate that technology into the phones, where you'll see 2, 3, up to 4 cameras. I think we're up to 4 cameras at this point on the back of your phone, where it allows for greater light sensitivity, greater depth of field, more lifelike images, and better capacity to take images in low light situations, which is where digital cameras usually tend to fail horribly in low light situations. But that has been drastically improving in recent years. Also built-in microphones, which obviously would be needed for a phone. And it's not just for phone calls though. And it allows for dictation, text to speech, which is another good one. Taking notes, recording messages, all that kind of fun stuff. So it allows for greater productivity as well. Many of them have built-in GPS at this point as well, which allows for better location services. And so we don't have to rely on the old Garmin's, which you had to, pay to upgrade your maps every year. This is done automatically depending on the service that you utilize. And then finally, get into internal storage, which is most commonly an eMMC because it's low power consumption, and it is easy to integrate with the circuit board itself. Some devices allow for expandable memory, like your smart cameras, smartphones, unless you have an Apple, and tablets. Some phablets allow for memory expansion with the use of micro SDs. Yeah, I think that's it, Greg. Here, I'll throw it up here. So right here. That's not Photoshop. That is a real point and shoot camera. So it has all these different lenses on it that serve different purposes. And it's really neat, is it allows you to do a lot of image adjustment on the back end rather than having to shoot everything in RAW and, you know, do Photoshop and all that stuff. And, you know, you may lose what you're doing. This allows you to do a ton of stuff on the back end because it captures so much data in every shot. So, you know.
Looks like Alienware.
Yeah, right. I looked at getting one of those. I was like, man, that'd be really cool because then like it'd be a lot less work on the back end because I did some amateur photography or whatever. And then I looked and saw the price tag on it and I was like, I'm good. I'll just work with my DSLR. I'm good. It was like 3 times the cost of my DSLR. All right. Little quiz. Pause the recording. All right. Mobile operating systems. We will get into this a little bit deeper. I think we have a whole technical session just on mobile operating systems. But many companies have kind of developed them. There's been a few varieties over the years. And the industry has changed pretty quickly over the last couple decades. Being able to understand and work with a variety of them is a benefit to you as an IT professional. You may hate Apple, but you may need to have the ability to work on Apple in your job. You may hate Android, but you may still have need to have the ability to work on it. It's that, again, I keep bringing up that Ford versus Chevy argument. You know, some people think Apple is the greatest thing on the planet. Nothing could ever beat it. And then you have people in the Android family, same thing. You know, and, you know, when I'm asked which is better, my answer usually is it depends. You know, what are you using it for? You know, that will tell you a little bit better which one would be better for you. So if you have an Android, hopefully you know somebody with an Apple phone so you can kind of practice on it a little bit. Just basic stuff, you know, you don't have to go in there and completely, you know, wipe their phone. And vice versa, if you're an Apple person and you haven't worked on an Android and you know somebody with an Android, it's good to just kind of have basic navigation, understand where things are. When we talk about mobile device configuration, we'll get into some basic steps on how to do certain things. And it's easier if you do that a couple times. So at the time, 10, 12 years ago, these were the top 3 mobile operating systems. You had iOS, Google Android, and Windows Phone IS. Apple operating system is a closed source proprietary operating system. They are very, very picky about the types of software that they allow onto their platform. They're notorious for finding side-loaded apps that you go to when you go to third-party vendors, not through their app store, and killing those throughout updates. Like they find the most popular ones and try to stamp them out with each update. So they only want software on these applications coming in through the app store. There are ways around this. You can jailbreak your phone, do all that kind of stuff, but that voids any warranty you may have the moment you jailbreak a phone. If you don't have a warranty and you want to give this a shot, there's plenty of tutorials about it online. Google Android is what is called an open source operating system, which means the code is free to view for anybody. So anybody can go in and look at the code on Android and they can try to improve upon it. They can build upon it. They can test that code, all that kind of stuff. The only requirement is, because it's based off of the Linux platform, is if you create a new operating system on top of it, you too have to publish your code. So that is like one of these service agreements with regards to open source. Typically, the cost in dealing with an open source software has to do with IT maintenance. So you may pay people for updated service packs or IT support when you're utilizing these open source systems. The operating systems, we'll get into this a little bit later. With the iOS, it's, they do version 1, 2, 3, 4, 0.1, 0.2. Android, they do things alphabetically based off of sweets. So you have Jelly Bean, Marshmallow, Nougat, Oreo, Pie, I guess was the, P. So each one is based off of a sweet, and it's in alphabetical order. And then, what was that?
They call it desserts in the
or desserts, yeah.
Yeah.
Then you got Microsoft Windows Phone OS, closed source. Much like all Microsoft software, they do not share their code. It is proprietary. They try to keep control of that. But there were other issues with the Windows Phone, but we'll get into that when we talk about the operating systems a little bit later. Here's some other ones that did not do not hold a large portion of the market, but were big at certain times, like the BlackBerry OS. BlackBerry was one of the biggest operating systems for a long time. They were one of the first ones that had the full QWERTY keyboard for email and all that fun stuff. They were very much the big dog in the market for a long time. Then you had Symbian, which terminated at 2012. BlackBerry ended in 2013. HP OS, which was Palm OS. If you remember the old Palm pilots, which was some of the first PDAs or personal digital assistants. When that stuff was first hitting the market, HP was the leader in that forefront. Bada was pretty big up until 2014. It was a Samsung version. Only worked on 3 types of phones though. Migo in 2001 was replaced by Tizen. Tizen was kind of popular, but it didn't really take off in the mobile operating system, but it really hit it big in the smart TV arena. Like their operating systems didn't seem to work really well for phones, but for the smart TVs, like they control almost a quarter of that market, which is insane. That is a huge chunk of the smart TV market utilizes this particular operating system. So it's kind of one of those things like the people who create like 3M, when they created Post-its, they were actually looking for a super adhesive, and they found an extremely weak adhesive that works multiple times. And then the Post-it note was born. So sometimes mistakes can lead to big successes. So where do these operating systems tend to promulgate? Well, iOS, as it is proprietary to Apple, it's on the iPhone and the iPad. That's it. They have one for the watch as well, but it's called Watch OS. The Windows Mobile was typically on your Nokia, and the Surface as well. And then the Android, since the operating system is free, is pretty attractive to a lot of different companies. So you got your Samsung, Nexus, Sony, Amazon, HTC, LG, and a bunch more on that list. Accessories. How do we take something that is already pretty useful and just make it even more so? All sorts of fun things can be used to augment your mobile devices. Bluetooth headsets, so that we can use our phones for, communication, as well as things like music, podcasts, all that kind of fun stuff. Built-in microphone speakers, protective covers like your OtterBoxes and stuff like that, game pads so that you can actually efficiently play games on a mobile device rather than trying to get it to react quickly on the touchscreen. Docking stations where you can get almost laptop functionality out of a tablet. I used to have a lot of people in my classes in college that had keyboards with docking stations on it for their phones. And they would go into their notes, they would dock their Android phone, and then they would just type their notes into their phone. And then after class, they would undock it, fold their keyboard up, and walk away. And it was extremely useful for productivity in that manner. Credit card readers, you know, like the Square. If you've ever been to like carnivals or trade shows or any of that stuff, where you have a bunch of small vendors operating there, they'll, you know, food trucks, they'll use that Square, which plugs right into a mobile device, and then it turns it right into a credit card reader. Memory, micro SDs, we talked about that, expanding memory, car chargers, so that we can charge these devices on the phone, and even battery packs to a large degree. So, I mean, I've seen them like small as like little, like a little tube of like, you know, lifesavers or whatever, you know, you have a battery pack that small, to really big ones that you can use for laptops and tablets and stuff like that, and you can charge them multiple times off of the single battery pack, which is pretty awesome. Many also use stylus pens and stuff like that, so they can, you know, increase the efficiency of your input, allow for artwork, more work productivity for signing documents, things like that. So just a sampling of some of the peripheral devices or accessories you can have with mobile devices. Obviously, there can be many more than this, but this is just kind of a sampling, give you an idea. Connection types. So many of these will have similar ports like laptops and computers may have. Some are unique to the phones themselves. Micro and mini USB, we talked about that when we were going through cables and connectors, was an extremely common one for the Android family, used for years, as well as like your Bluetooth headsets and stuff like that. Lightning cables, the 8-pin, and then prior to that was like the 18, or was it the 20-pin connector? You remember, Rachel?
I don't remember.
I'll have to look it up. I think it was a 20-pin, that big fat one that Apple used to use. I think that was a 20-pin connector. But now they use the 8-pin Lightning, which is significantly faster, also does data and charging on the same cable. You have Bluetooth connection, which essentially helps you create your PAN or personal area network, so you can have, you know, connect it to your Fitbit, you can connect it to your headphones, you can connect it to your computer and do updates that way, however you wish. Many of them are also equipped with what's called near field communication, or NFC, which is a short range technology, can give you a quick burst of information, not a lot of information, but a little bit of information over air. So like if any of you have used Google or Apple Pay, that's utilizing NFC, or near field communication. So it's heavily used for payment methods and stuff like that nowadays. And we will get into it, you know, for other things. Predominantly in business, they will use RFID for inventory, things like that. You know, those little like anti-theft little towers when you go into stores and stuff like that. And if you try to steal something, you walk out, it sets off an alarm. That's utilizing NFC or RFID tagging. There's little tags in there, and the towers send power to those tags and then alert the tower that something's passing through. It sets off an alarm. So that's the 30-pin. Thank you, Oscar. That's another use for the RFID. Proprietary specific, some of these ports include power. Most manufacturers have kind of gone to some of the standard physical ones just because it's so much easier, and customers tend to gravitate towards those, because if you have to buy a very specialized connector for your device and it breaks, then you have to go buy it again. That tends to aggravate you, and the next time you purchase a mobile device, you're likely not to purchase that one because of wanting to avoid those types of problems. So you're going to look for something with more universal connectivity. And then lastly, they get into hotspots, where a single device can share its internet connection with other devices within range over the 802.11 Bluetooth, or utilizing a direct connection to the device. Early versions use a direct connection through plugging it into the phone and then plugging it into your laptop, and you can use the internet from your phone to transfer your laptop. That was always fun, because if you ever received a phone call, it would instantly cut off whatever you're doing on the internet. But it's improved drastically since then. That is specifically called tethering. The hotspot version is more, you know, sharing your internet connection with multiple devices, where tethering is sharing it to a single device. Questions so far? How many people have a home phone?
Not in years.
We got one. I'm with you, Yuki. I still have a home phone.
I keep it bad for you.
Yeah, I keep
too high.
No. See,
I have a home number, but I don't have the actual phone.
No, we have a phone and it's plugged in, and for like $8 a month, it stays powered on. And the reason we keep it is hurricanes. If we lose power, phones can still receive power through the phone line, because there is a power component to the phone line. So we can still make calls for emergency if we lose power for multiple days. So that is a one reason to still have a hard line to your house. Most people use their cell phones as their home phone now, right? At this time, which was like 5 years ago, 64% of Americans use smartphones. It's probably higher now. We're probably in the 80s at this point. 34% of cell internet users go online mostly using their phone. Again, this is probably significantly higher now. I would gather it's probably in the 50%, especially based on walking through the city and you see everybody like this. You know, nobody's looking up or at anybody. They're all surfing the net on their phone. Average person spends about 4.5 hours every day just on their phone, which is a lot of time. Yes, Craig.
All right. This actually brings up a question I had throughout this program. Are we supposed to utilize like old stats for this test that we're going to take?
Yes.
Okay.
That is where I try to differentiate between the test and real life as much as I can. But based off the statistics that they're using for the test, I will tell you, based off of the test, this is what they're asking you. Because obviously there's going to be a lot of updated data, because a lot's happened in the last 5 years. A lot's happened in the last 2 years to drastically change the way we interact with technology. And unfortunately, the 10.01 hasn't been updated to support that, which is why they're now rolling out the 11.01, which is the new version of the test. So that should take a lot of this stuff into account. Y'all are going to be my last 10.01 group. After this group, it's going to be 11.01 all the way. Of course, maybe next time Rachel will leave and I'll be the TA.
No.
I'll take a step back, be more casual.
I guess it's good and bad. You know, the good thing is that, you know, it's tried and tested. You know, all the data is in. Mm-hmm. And the bad part is it's all new. You know, who knows what the first round is going to look like.
Well, that's why I'm actually going through a lecture series right now where they're telling us all the stuff that's changed.
Yeah.
So they're letting us know what stuff is retiring, like they're not going to be talking about that much anymore. And then they're kind of getting into what are they adding. And this is directly a lecture series being presented by CompTIA, because it's going to be about another 6 months or so, probably, before the new textbooks are out. You know, because your Mike Myers and your Cybex and all that stuff have to react to what it is they put out as their standards. That's right, Oscar, growth mindset. It's all about confidence, Rachel. Got the skill.
Okay.
You may find you love it. I am not a teacher. I was never, that wasn't like my skill set. I stumbled into it, literally. All right. So typically we utilize what are called pans. Do what?
I say you're doing a pretty good job for something you stumble on.
I appreciate that. I really do. But again, like my wife often face palms when she walks in. She's like, "You really teach like that?" I'm like, "Yes, I do." It works.
Ellie, your wife is a teacher too, right?
Yeah, she's a teacher. Like she's a legit teacher. Like, like went to school for it.
Just hating on you.
Yeah, I know. She's, it's the fact that I can teach in shorts. But so mobile device capabilities have just been exploding over the last few years, and it's really interesting to see where this field is going, both the good and the bad. We'll talk a lot about stuff like this in security. DW often stated that when I started talking about security, it seemed like the class was more of a case study on paranoia than, feeling like you were learning something, because the more you learn about security, the more concerned you become. But that's usually the case. But, we'll get there when we get there. You got about another 2 weeks of, bright, fluffy clouds, and the world is a very nice place. And then we'll get into the more sinister stuff. But we utilize a lot of peripherals to create PANs, or what are called personal area networks. So we use a combination or a mesh of devices to increase our productivity and usage from these devices. And that's where we're talking about, coupling a Fitbit or Bluetooth headphones or speakers or all that stuff, all within a singular mobile device that's sharing with all of this stuff. Yes, Gali.
I was just gonna add to that about the security aspect, and to me, that's the same thing I feel like about technology as a whole. Is like as we get advanced into using so much technology, it's like we're kind of losing control of everything, and just like letting somebody else control everything we do, listen, hear, all that aspect. And even though it's a good thing, automatically everything is automated, but it's like we don't really have control over anything really anymore. So
that's
not even the security
when we get into security, you'll hear me say this a lot. You have to find a balance for you that works between convenience and security. Typically, the more convenient something is, the less secure it is. Right. Typically, the more secure something is, the less convenient it is.
Right.
Like I can guarantee my computer does not get a virus if I bury it in a metal box in the backyard. But it's not very convenient or useful if I do that, right?
But now you can see like a lot of things just kind of force you to give up that, because they'll say, we need permission to do this. So that way, we can, but we need access for everything. So you can't use it if we don't have this access.
And then you need to make a determination for yourself. Are you willing to give up that privacy for the convenience of the service you're being offered?
Yeah.
So convenience versus security. So we'll get into that more, I promise. Okay. So how do we use our mobile devices in general? Again, this is some outdated statistics. This is not really for A+. This is just kind of a visual thing for you guys. Coordinate meetings or get-togethers with friends. When I was growing up, it was, hey, I'll meet you at, the mall, so to speak. And then you'd get there and you'd wander around for an hour trying to find that person. Now we use the devices, like I'll meet you at the fair at this time. And then as soon as you arrive, where are you at? I'm at the Ferris wheel. Okay, I'll be there in like 5 minutes. I'm coming through the gates now. We could have a much better communication. We could do it on group chat, so everybody knows what everybody's doing. Although, have you ever been like brought onto a group chat and like you really didn't necessarily want to be a part of it, but you had to be for like little bits of information, and then you had like 2 or 3 people that not realizing they're on that chat and going on for hours, like 50 different, pings, and you're just getting blown up.
That's why all group chats go immediately on Do Not Disturb when I get part of them.
But sometimes you need important information from there.
That's why Do Not Disturb is a great tool, though.
Yeah, that's true.
You can turn it off.
That is true. Other things we use them for, we can look up, go to Yelp or something else and look up whether or not you want to visit that business. Although you have to take into account people are far more likely to leave a review if they had a bad experience than they are if they had a good experience. So you always have to take that into account. Looking up scores of sporting events. Fantasy football, huge on mobile devices. Get help in an emergency situation, about 19%. Solve an unexpected problem. Like sitting here in class and talking and saying, what does a nit equal? Did anybody look that up? No, I'm the only one that it bothered me that I didn't know what a nit was. So yeah, I went and looked it up. And if you're interested, I'll tell you. And then the other one is get up to date, up to the minute traffic for transit information. Like if, going to work, like in Jacksonville, we have 7 bridges over the rivers here. And if one of those bridges go out, it's horrible for traffic in the morning. Like it's really bad because we have several rivers that come through the city and there's only so many ways across them. So up to the minute traffic updates, critical, because there always seems to be somebody getting into an accident on one of the bridges. And then find information to help settle an argument, like who was in this movie in the 1980s? When was this song a #1 hit? What was the batting average of this, this baseball player, other things like that. So we use them for a pretty broad variety of reasons. We were getting more into productivity with them, thankfully. But the downside of that is we're always connected to our jobs. Where it used to be, we left, we forgot about it, we were done. Now it seems like we're connected to our jobs 100%. So that is the downside of that. With that, we come to the close of this technical session. We should now be able to identify mobile devices and explain what exactly qualifies it to be called a mobile device versus, a PlayStation. Describe the characteristics of common mobile devices, including tablets, phones, e-readers, phablets, wearables, and compare and contrast some of the software platforms, capabilities, what have you. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints?